So at the point of doing this video, we are about to see some sporting action return. The lockdowns are beginning to ease and we're seeing some football return. And that's going to possibly present an opportunity for us. And that's why in this video, I wanted to talk about home advantage and why I think we could be on the cusp of some big opportunities in the domestic football leagues.
If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. Or why not visit our website where you can download a free trial of BetAngel Professional, but also visit the forum where you can get detailed images, examples, and downloadable files. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released.
So I think most people are familiar with the concept of home advantage. Teams that are playing at home tend to win more frequently than teams that play away. If you're struggling in the league, then you always think that you've got a chance to win a match at home. However, if you go away to somewhere, you're sort of thinking that maybe you're a goal down already. And home advantage is something that has been around for a long period of time. But it's worth examining precisely what home advantage is, because I've seen a lot of people talk about home advantage, but not actually give you the relevant stats and data. Now, as you know, I've collected data on football matches for a long time, and I've actually gone back to the very first time that a lot of these leagues were formed, and the data that I collected goes all the way back to 1890, and you're sort of thinking, what's the relevance of some of that data? But it's amazing what you can dig out within that particular data. But if we actually look back at data from that long ago and bring it up to date, you can actually see that the concept of home advantage has been around since at least 1890. Much stronger back then, a little bit weaker nowadays, but the concept of home advantage has always been a thing. And when you play at home, you have about twice as much chance of winning as if you play away. And of course, you've got the draw thrown in there as well. But again, you win more frequently than you draw. There is definitely a home advantage within football. Now, when you look at the home advantage over a period of time, in all of the time that I've been on the exchanges and most of the time that I've been analysing football, I've always known that home advantage is worth about 0.4 of a goal. Now, if you look at some of the other videos that I've done on football, you will see that I always talk about things in terms of goals, because goals determine everything, really. If you look at the number of corners, shots on target, all manner of different things, they tend to be related to the number of likely goals that are going to be scored in the match and how they're divided up between two teams. So this is why I always talk about goals, and home advantage is worth about 0.4 of a goal on average. Now, obviously, that's going to vary quite dramatically according to the strength of the team, because, teams that are right at the top of the league and just can bang in goals left, right and centre, they're going to have an absolutely massive home advantage, but they're going to play pretty well away as well. And as a consequence, the home advantage of the teams that they're playing away will be decreased. In fact, they will probably be negative. But when you take an example of a league overall, and then you average out the number of goals between the home team and the away team, you end up with a figure, and that figure is how many goals home advantage is worth. So if two teams are equally matched, then you would basically price them like that, as though neither team has any particular advantage. But to insert the home advantage, then you basically give 0.4 of a goal to the home team, and then you redo your calculations, and then out come the odds for that particular match. So yeah, when I look at home advantage, I don't look at it in terms of percentages. That's how most people sort of represent it, saying, oh yeah, a team playing at home is likely to win sort of 45 to 50% of the time. I always look at it as being 0.4 of a goal. That's how much home advantage is worth. But why, I hear you see, why do teams at home score 0.4 of a goal more than they do when they're playing away? What possible advantage could they have playing at home? And there are a number of factors that you can take into account. I'm not going to go into them exhaustively. I'm going to sort of skirt over the top of this in this particular example, because it's more important just to generalize what we're talking about here. But you can think of a number of things that would make them feel that they've got an advantage. Or, I mean, we know they have an advantage, but what are the contributing factors of that potential advantage? So I actually did some work for a director of a football club not that long ago, where I went off, got all of the data for him, and we were examining all of the facets behind it. And, you can put a number of things into place to describe why home advantage exists. If you're playing at your home ground, you're going to be familiar, you're going to be more relaxed, and when you turn up, you sort of know the groundsman and how he prepares the ground, and, where the sun sets and stuff like that. So there's a certain sense of familiarity for home teams who get to play there week in, week out, and they just know the whole place inside out. Whereas, of course, an away team only gets to come to that ground once a year. So they're less likely to be familiar with that particular ground. And also, there's just that sense of playing at your own ground, which gives you a little bit more comfort. So it may be that there's less performance anxiety, is sort of more or less what I'm describing for home advantage there. But also, if Newcastle had to travel to Bournemouth, that's a long way to travel. And the Vitality Stadium, or whatever it is currently being named at Bournemouth, I always prefer calling it Dean Court, will be very different from St James's Park. But then you've also got the potential fatigue of travel that's taking place there. So completely different ground, different feel, and a long way to travel. And vice versa for Bournemouth heading in the other direction. If you think Bournemouth heading to Newcastle, that's going to feel very different from players that have potentially got used to Dean Court. However, I think over many years, what has tended to happen is that it's sort of balanced out a bit, because of course players are interchangeable now and play at many different grounds, and you'd be surprised if some of these sort of things caught them out. However, travel probably is still an impact there. And when you look at European travel and tennis players, you tend to find that there is an element of fatigue when they're crossing time zones. Not that you have to cross a time zone in a domestic football league, but nonetheless, there's probably an impact there in terms of the effect that travel is going to have on individual players. Question about how much, but I have done some research on that, but I'm not going to go into that. It took me ages to do, and it's too long for this particular video. The sort of tactics that you can use, I've mentioned already, the sun setting at a certain time of the day, or, you always have one end of the ground that has the very vocal support of the home supporters and one end that doesn't. So it's very likely that you will be able to take advantage of that in some tactical way. I think that's something that is critical within home advantage as well. But when I was researching it, one of the interesting things that came out of it was the crowd noise did have an impact, but in a way that you wouldn't expect, because if you go to football regularly, you know that there's one section of the crowd that just sings constantly and basically pulls the rest of the crowd along with them. But the interesting thing about academic research into this particular area is that they've looked at all of the factors that I've mentioned as well, but they also did look at crowd noise, and they also looked at the effect that crowd noise would have on the actual match itself. And when they'd done that, they looked more specifically at the effect of crowd noise on officials. So when you're looking at home advantage, there is a big chunk of it is being derived from that particular crowd and the influence that they're having on the officials. Officials don't do it knowingly. It's a sort of heuristic, a bias that they have within themselves. And they always have to be seen to be being fair, and they have to sort of run the game effectively, as it were. And it seems that through a lot of the academic evidence that's been accumulated, it's the effect that the crowd is having on the officials that very often confers an element of home advantage. So the interesting thing about that is that this sort of implies that there's a potential opportunity coming up here. One of the issues you have when you're doing all of this types of analysis, reports, and you're looking at academia, is that you can't specifically say for sure that something is there unless if you have a control group. But the problem is you can't get a control group when we're talking about football. You can't just sort of say, right, all of the crowd get removed. Now, there have been some sanctions where that's occurred, but not on a decent scale. But all of a sudden, with the return from the global pandemic that we have, we're going to have a lot of sports played behind closed doors. So it's a golden opportunity to get that control sample. It's wonderful. So we'll actually be able to see if all of the theory behind crowd noise and the impact that they have on officials comes to play out. And if it does, then you've got to think that opposing home teams is probably the way to go, or backing away teams. But of course, we need a lot of games to be able to get that data out of it. So I'm sort of hoping that lots of seasons restart, but with a lack of crowds, because then we'll actually be able to quantify accurately how much of home advantage is sort of down to the lack of crowd and the impact that they have on officials. I think it's going to be a fairly unique opportunity. I'm willing to stick my neck out a bit and say that I'm willing to sort of go against. I think it'll take a while for people to adjust their models to take account of that. So I'm willing to go against favoured home teams on the basis that I think there probably is some value there. Now, it could be that I get that wrong, or that it takes a long time for that to show through, and maybe we run out of season by the time that occurs. But I will be collecting lots of data to have a good look at it to understand if that's in fact what I'm seeing within those particular markets. So I think there is a potential trading and betting opportunity for you when we start playing football matches behind closed doors. I really hoped that we would start playing at neutral venues as well, but a lot of clubs don't want to do that. And you know why they don't want to do it? Because they want home advantage. Brighton have got a really hard run in to the end of the season, and they were very negative on going to neutral venues because they knew that would probably work against them. So you can see that even the clubs are taking notice of home advantage and the benefits that brings, even if there is no particular crowd. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this comes out. I'm going to collect the data, have a look at it, and maybe I'll get the chance to talk about it in a future video. But the first league that's going to come back, that's going to have decent liquidity as well, is going to be the German Bundesliga. So I had a look at the prior season in the Bundesliga, fired up my spreadsheet, had a quick look at the data relating to it, and had a look at the average number of goals and the home advantage that was available within the Bundesliga. So the average number of goals is actually quite high for any particular league. The number of goals per game was coming in about 3.18 in the last season. But the home advantage was 0.4. So average number of goals in a game was about 3.2 and the home advantage was about 0.4. The reason for the large number of goals is because of the dominance of the top teams in Germany. We're beginning to see this in other leagues as well. It's distorting the home advantage somewhat because they're winning always at home and they're winning quite a few games away. So that's altering those figures ever so slightly. But also the average number of goals is above normal. And if you look at the way that the teams performed in the German Bundesliga, you can see a cluster of them in the top right-hand quadrant of my spreadsheet. And then that has effectively pushed all the others down into the lower left. So there's a big divergence in terms of performance in the Bundesliga. So yeah, last year the home advantage was 0.4. So I reran the stats before doing this video to have a look at what the home advantage was this year. And it is actually a little bit lower. So when we look at the advantage this year, it's dropped a little bit. But of course, you can't, with an incomplete season, you're not going to have a full set of data. So it's quite possible that we may see this number change as we progress towards the end of the season. But it is a little bit lower, which doesn't make it so nice for us to look at our control sample over the next weeks or months to try and work out just how much this home advantage is going to be worth, or how much it isn't worth when there is no crowd. So when we look at the spreadsheet from this year, because it's incomplete, the home advantage is a little bit lower, but maybe we're not looking at some sort of real data there, as it were. So I think that as we go through this particular process across a number of different leagues, we'll begin to build up a much better picture. The question we have is the market going to actively discount into it? So when I sit behind my desk tomorrow, I've had a look at it tonight actually, but it's more important that I look when the liquidity is higher and the market's a bit more flusher. I'm going to see what the market is discounting into each of those matches. And then I'm going to start cross-comparing that with the actual results that come out. And I'm going to see if there is in fact a discrepancy between the models that people have put up, which may or may not contain home advantage in them, versus what actually happens. But I do suspect that there is going to be an advantage, excuse the pun, in being able to look and bet against teams that are expected to have a decent home advantage and expected to win at home by your average number of goals. But of course, we are about to find out. But certainly looking forward to the next few weeks, and that's the sort of area that I'm hoping to exploit. So yeah, looking forward to the return of as much football as we can get before we're supposed to start the next season, and hope that there's a few opportunities in there for you. But I hope that that video has explained home advantage and how I'm looking to use that over the next coming weeks and months. To football, after all of the lockdowns that we've seen across Europe to do with coronavirus.